Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is uh, Bava Kamma daf kuf bet. Let me share my screen and we will get started. Um, Yesterday we went a little bit on an aside, and so let me share my screen and we'll go over sort of how we got to the topic that we're talking about. We're going to be talking a little bit about Shemitah at the beginning of today, um, and so yesterday we discussed the question of whether dye on a material is considered separate or is it part of the material. And the reason that was, and first we had to figure out, well, why was that even relevant? Why did we even care? And we ended up dealing with a couple of different situations that could potentially be relevant. For example, if a monkey came along and dyed wool that belongs to one person with ingredients that belong to somebody else, can the owner of the ingredients say, listen, you need to give me back, you need to at least pay me for my dye? Or do we say no, that the owner of the wool can say, look, I don't own anything of yours, that dye no longer exists. It's colored my things, but it isn't actually on them. It doesn't actually affect. I don't owe you anything, and so that is the discussion that we have. Um, and so now that we've been talking about that, what was the proof? Were we able to prove one way or the other who wins in that situation of the monkey dying? And that's dying with a Y, as in coloring, a donkey color. A monkey coloring a garment. And we tried two times to prove that, in fact, what the halacha would be, and we were not successful either time. And that led us to a discussion of Shemitah, and Rava raised two apparent contradictions. As part of the second contradiction, we discussed how wood during Shemitah. So again, Shemitah during the seventh year, you're not allowed to do business, and you're not allowed to even take ownership after a certain point of time if there's produce in the field. So and you want to take some into your house, that's totally fine. But when there's no longer produce in the field, you can't have any stored of that produce in your home from this year. You would have to do it from a prior year, from non-Shemitah years. And so the question is what about wood? What about things that sort of usually, one can store well, but the key is that, as we saw, are they things that are consumed at the same time that you benefit from them? So food is a natural example, right? When you eat the food, you've consumed the food no longer exists, and that eating is when you benefit from it. However, when it comes to wood, what you do is you consume the wood gets burned into charcoal, the wood is no longer wood, it's now a piece of charcoal, but you have not yet done the benefit that you want. The benefit that you want is from the piece of charcoal. And so as a result, the wood is different, and as a result, we say, with respect to fuel for a fire, for things that you were going to create coal out of, they are not considered. That's not considered subject to the prohibitions of Shemitah. So that's how. And we said, well, 1 second. What about oily wood? Oily wood, which I gather is sort of like wood that you put oil on, and if you ever saw a movie where they dip a wood in oil and then light it on fire, that's what oily wood is good for. It's a torch, essentially. And so the question is what about the wood that's used as a torch? Do we say that because it is consumed, meaning that the purpose of the torch is to light space up, So because at the time that the wood is being consumed, you're benefiting. So as a result, it's going to be subject to the prohibitions of Shemitah. Or do we say, no, look, most wood is not used for that purpose, and therefore we're not going to treat oily wood any differently than we would treat other wood. So even if you were intending, when you gathered some wood from your field during the 7th year, and said, this is the wood I'm going to use for lighting torches. So I would not have that. You would still be allowed to have collected that into your house, even if there was no more wood available for that purpose out in the field. And so that was the way we concluded yesterday. And now, as we pick up at the top of Kuf Bet Amud Aleph,
We
end of the
raised the
first.
question yesterday also that perhaps wood that is used for heating the house might also be a situation where the wood is consumed at the same time that it's being used, because a person's cold, there's no heat for the house, he uses the wood for the heat.
So certainly, if you used it in the way that we use firewood today, you would absolutely be right, 100%. However, my guess is that most heating of the house was effectively done through the oven, and in the oven they probably would have used the charcoal rather than firewood, because firewood is not as good to cook with as others. So it depends on the heating methodology, but you're absolutely right that there are certainly other situations where we use wood today in a method that the method of usage creates a benefit at the same time as the consumption. And so, yes, if you talk about a wood in a fireplace, you're absolutely right. That would be another kind of example that you would say that should be treated like the oily wood. And the question is, do we? And here's the in some ways a more complicated question is, does the Metzias change? Because nowadays, right, probably you're right that most wood that is consumed is is the benefit is created at the same time as the consumption. So as a result, that may be a little bit more difficult. I don't know overall wood usages, what the percentages are, but certainly I'm sure that firewood, ends up being a material percentage. So that being said, of course, wood is also used for furniture and a lot of other things. So I can't be 100% sure, but the point is that if in fact nowadays most wood is used for immediate benefit, so then maybe wood wouldn't have been a great example any longer if we were to be writing the Gemara now. But the bottom line is again, we see this distinction between things that are where the benefit is happening at the time of consumption, then it's going to be subject to Shemitah. And when the benefit is not at the time of consumption, then it's not going to be Shemitah and not subject to Shemitah. And the second part of that is that even though you may personally have intended to use wood for a fuel on a fire, we're going to say, hey, even if that was your intention, you're going to use wood for a torch. We're going to say that your opinion doesn't affect that wood. That we go based on the majority usage and not on your specific usage. And that it leads us directly into Rav Kahana's statement, because Rav Kahana is going to say that issue is actually subject to a machlokas Tanaim. So let's take a look. So Amar Rav Kahana, that when it comes to wood for fueling a fire, meaning, do we say that because the majority of wood is for fueling a fire, and therefore the consumption is not at the time of benefit, that therefore we allow you to use it anyway? Or do we say, no, you focus on what the person intended? So let's take a look. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Ein Mosrin Peiros Shvius. You're not allowed to hand over Shemitah produce, Shvius produce, 7th-year produce, Lola Mishra below Lechvusa. You can't use it for soaking flax in a pool, or for a laundry pool. So the Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, no, you can do for both of them. No sin perishri is l'tocha mishra l'tocha kvusa. You can do it for both. So let's take a look and see what the people's reasoning is. And then when we're done with that, we'll try to align it with the debate regarding wood for a fire, wood for a torch. So my time of the rabbanon, what's the reason for the rabbis? So I'm a krala below the mishra, right? The Torah says that the produce of the seventh year is going to be for eating. The implication is eating, but not using in a pool to soak flax. And similarly to eat, but not for laundry. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Amar kralachem l'chol tzarchechem. No, the pasuk tells you that that it's for you. The end of the pasuk. So as a result, that shows that any kind of need that you want. Well, in second, Rabbana Nami Haksiv Lachem, what do the rabbis do with the fact that it says for you? So Lachem Dumya Achla. No, it's got to be similar to eating. B'misha Hanaaso Uvi'iruo Shavin. It's got to have the consumption and the benefit at the same time. Yatsu Mishru Chuvusa Lahanasan Achar Biuran. Whereas when it comes to a soaking pool or a laundry pool, the benefit, i.e., the softening or treatment of the flax or the cleaning of the clothing, that happens in some level after the material is gone, after the underlying material that you are putting into the pool is no longer around. So the benefit only comes after the consumption. And Rashi now aligns us with the two opinions, with how this affects the question of wood for fueling a fire, wood for a torch in particular. So Yatsu Mishra Ukuvusa, if we take a look at Rashi, 11 lines down in the narrow lines, Shemisha'a Shematilin Pishtan, Obeged Biyayin, that when you put the flax or the clothing into the wine, Niskalkel, the wine is no longer usable, it's ruined. Vinivar, and it's destroyed. But v'hanaso enu ella ad shalosha yamim v'arba ad sheyehei hapishtan sharui, until the flax actually gets soaked in the cloth gets soaked in the wine and is able to absorb the color. It's not going to have had its benefit yet. So as a result, the ruining and the benefit don't happen at the same time. And similarly with the piece of clothing. Tonight, and with the clothing that you're using in laundry. Tonight, and this is the machlokas tanaim that Rav Kahana was highlighting. The Rabbanan Sivri, because the Rabbanan think the following: Stam peros la'achila. When you have fruit, they are for eating. V'chayla alehu kedusha shvius, and so as a result, they become subject to the prohibitions of shvius k'de amran la'el, as we said earlier, the kol davar shahanaso ubiaro shaveh, that as long as the time of the eating and the destruction and the benefit are at the same time, chayla, you have the applicability of the laws of shvius. Hilkach afil lekatan lemishra lekavisa. So lo lahanya machshava la'avkuye isuran. So so as a result, when you have a minority that says, "Listen, I want to use it for a soaking pool or a laundry pool," that doesn't matter. It doesn't change your thinking, and so that's why this opinion, the rabbi's opinion, would say that when you want to use wood for a torch, it doesn't affect the fact that underlying the product of wood, it is usually a product that has the benefit and the consumption at different times. And so while you may have chosen to use this particular piece of wood as a torch, it's not going to change the prohibition that's associated. And so it's like you cut branches for wood. Ulamishtaru demishtarula dahasam stamayhu lahaki ulahaki, and that you have it for this particular purpose. That's the general understanding. Aval peiros stamen la'achila. But when it comes to fruit, they are for the other purpose. They're for eating. Umishas yitzirasan chayal kedusha san. And so as soon as they're formed, they become kodesh with shvius. Besulo mahani machshava and lav kuye. Um, and you can't use a thought to take them out of the category. And therefore, ba'asur lemeshra uchavisa. Therefore, you can't use them for soaking in laundry. Because you can only benefit, according to the rabbis, you can only benefit from these items at the moment that they are being consumed. Begabi eitzim nami, stam eitzim lahasaka. So too with wood. Regular wood is for burning. Lahasaka nitnu. Below chayla, afilu eitzim demishkan. And therefore, even if you use oily wood, you make the set up the wood to be oiled, and so that you would use it for a torch, that won't matter. Rabbi Yossi savar lo amrin and stam peris la'achil nitnu. Whereas Rabbi Yossi would tell you, no, the fruit are not necessarily for eating, because you could use fruit for different purposes. Umahanya behu machshava ka'ole kanim b'gefanim. That it will work to have a different thought, as when you're taking these leaves and grapes. Deheka deliktan lemishra havi davar shahanaso achar biuro. Because when you intend to use it for soaking, you're clearly intending for the hana to be after the destruction, and therefore below chayil alayhu shviyas. Therefore, the prohibitions of shvius don't apply. Kach matzati, that's what I found. But I think this is right, so we're going to go with Rashi on this point. So the point is that we've now shown that this machlokus between the rabbis and Rabbi Yossi can be a machlokus about whether or not oily wood should be treated like Shemitah. Because according to Rabbi Yossi, it should be treated like Shemitah, because it reverses the case, right? You're planning to use this piece of wood in a manner that the consumption and the benefit happen at the same time. Whereas the rabbis say, no, you can't change the nature of an item. And most wood is not for the consumption and benefit at the same time. So Rabbi Yossi Nami Haksiv L'Achla, the Gemara continues and says, well, 1 second, what does Rabbi Yossi do with the fact that it says L'Achla for eating? So Amar La Chahumi Bailai, look at it, Tanya. He would use it for the following brisa, Tanya L'Achla V'lo that it's in order to eat, for eating, and not for plastering. Now, melugma, the plastering that we're talking about here, is a salve that you would put on an injury, on a wound. And so that's what that is referring to. Ata omer la'achla v'lo l'melugma, well, enu ela la'achla v'lo l'kvusa. So the Baraisa continues, well, 1 second, why do you tell me that you're not allowed to use it for a salve? Why not say that you're not allowed to use it for laundry? So Keshehu Omer Lachem, well, the reason is because Lachem, La'achla is an exclusionary word, right? It narrows the focus, but Lachem is an expansive word. So the expansion, Hare Kvusa Amur. So that tells us that laundry is okay. So Ha Ma'ani Mekayim La'achla. And so how do I then have an exclusion for that the exclusion of eating applies? La'achla v'lo l'melugma, that it tells you that you can, that it's for eating and not for plastering. So the Brisa wonders, well, 1 second, why do you choose one direction? Meaning, why do you prefer to allow laundry as opposed to plaster, as opposed to usage as a salve? So Maraba ani es hakavusa sheshava b'chol adam. I'd rather include laundry because that's something that applies to everybody. Everybody wears clothing and therefore needs to clean it. But I will exclude The plastering, because the plaster, using it as like a compound that would be put on on an injury, that is only relevant to people who are not well. So, so as we see, this brisa uses la'achla as an exclusionary word specifically for the salve, and so as a result, that's the situation that Rabbi Yossi would use it for. So, kaman azla hadatanya. Now, what about the following brisa? Which opinion says the following? Which opinion is this like? Is it like the rabbis or Rabbi Yossi? La'acha below malugma. You can use it for eating, but not for a plaster. La'achla below laziluf. Eating and not for sprinkling. Now, what is sprinkling? This we've seen over time. If we take a look at Rashi, it's 6, 9, 12, 15 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi, maybe 16 lines up. L'zalev, Ziluf, Shemizalvin Yayin, you would sprinkle wine babayas in the house. Now, it's important to remember that the floors of homes would be dirt. And so you would sprinkle it on the dirt. Nami ain shava b'chol adam. And this also is not something that everybody needs. She'ain sarach ziluf ela adam ma'unag uma'udan. That somebody who's very sensitive and needs a nice smell would be the kind of person who would need it. Now, I would think that all of us would be in that category, but in any event, that's the situation. And the point is so that we say that you can't use it for sprinkling. Now, by the way, the other benefit of the sprinkling is that it helps pack the dirt down, so you don't have as much dust. And we've seen that with respect to water. But some people would go a step further and would sprinkle wine if they were more wealthy, because that would be not only add to the allowing the dirt to stay down, but it would also help with the smell. So la'achla v'lo asos mimenu apictozin. And it also would not make an apictozin. And what's an apictozin? It's Rashi says, the next Rashi, vashit or lahaki, that it's some kind of, I don't know what the vashit is. I'm not recognizing that French at the moment, but lahaki is to throw up. So the point is that it was some kind of emetic, is the word that they use here, that would cause a person to throw up. And so, so that those are the three things that we learn from la'achla: not plastering, not a salve, not sprinkling, and not an emetic. So who is that like? Rabbi Yossi to Ikarabanan, because if you were to say that it was like the rabbis, Ikanami Mishra Chavusa, it should have also told us that you can't use it for soaking and laundry. So the point is that we're seeing that sprinkling and using as an emetic are like plastering in that they are not used by everybody. And so as a result, that's why they are excluded, according to Rabbi Yossi, and as part of le'ochla. Okay, so that is the end of our a little aside, and we get to now return to our Mishnah, in which Rabbi Yehuda taught that when the dyer makes a mistake, the owner pays less of the lesser of expenses or benefit. And
How
the
do they
Gemara now,
mention the concept of sprinkling? Normally, with Shemitah wine, one is not supposed to waste it. So even people have to be careful with Havdalah, not to use Shemitah wine for Havdalah, because it spills. So sprinkling wine would seem to be an Isser Mukhlat of using wine Shaviyat.
100%, and that is in fact everybody agrees that it. But here's the argument in the other direction. When you lose the wine in Havdalah, right? Your purpose of losing the wine is not in fact to lose the wine. Meaning you're not. That's not an intentional thing. I mean, obviously you spill, maybe you're going to dip the fire into the wine, but that's essentially ruining the wine. Here, this is an affirmative positive usage of the wine, right? It is not a loss of the wine. The question is whether this is considered enough like achila, like a benefit, that we can treat it like it's as if you did eat it. Because the person who's sprinkling it on the floor is, again, it's not about wasting the wine, it's about using it for a different purpose. It's sort of like an air spray, so to speak. You wouldn't ordinarily say, if you had an air spray, that when you spritz it, you're wasting it. It's not a waste, or when you spritz, what are those? There are some, spritzes that you sprinkle on fabric. If the fabric gets a bad smell, you don't say that you're wasting that in that situation. And yet, because of the requirement of li'achla that it says in connection with Shvius, you're absolutely right that everybody is agreeing in the end that when it comes to sprinkling wine or making an emetic or using it as plaster, everybody agrees that those would be prohibited. That's certainly the way I'm understanding the Gemara. So you're absolutely right that it would be prohibited in connection with Shemitah, and you're absolutely right that one needs to be careful if you're using Shvius wine that you not necessarily use it in a way that will result in losses of the wine because some of the wine gets ruined. Okay, so so again, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ima shevach. Rabbi Yehuda said that if the benefit is greater than the expenses, so then you pay the expenses. If the expenses are greater, then you pay the benefit. So Yosef Rav Yosef. So who's the halacha like? And look, again, the other opinion said that it's as if you acquired the item. Rameir says that it's like you acquired the item, and therefore you pay all the worker needs to do is give back the payment of the value of the original materials that he was provided with. So Yosef Rav Yosef achori de Rabbi Abba. So Rav Yosef was sitting behind Rabbi Abba, Kamei de Rav Huna, and they were sitting in front of Rav Huna. The Yosef Rav Huna v'Ka'amar, Rabbi Huna was teaching the following: Halacha Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka, and we'll see where it was the case that he said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka, but halacha Rabbi Yehuda, and the halachas are like Rabbi Yehuda. Hadrinu Rabbi Yosef la'ape. Rabbi Yosef turned his face away. He was disappointed in Rav Huna's statement because Amar Bishlama Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka. I understand why you're going to tell me that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka. Itzrich, because I need you to tell me that. Because I might have thought he's arguing in a case with others, and maybe the majority would be the halacha. But in fact, we're going to say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua, and therefore you need to tell me it. Kamash Milan halacha kiyachid. So that's why you're going to tell me that the halacha is like an individual. Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka Maihi. And now, as a quick aside, what is the statement of Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka? And then we'll get back to why Rabbi Yosef did not think that Rav Huna needed to tell anything about the halacha being like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka, Maihi. Titania, we have the following brisa. Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka, Omer, Milva Bishtar, Einifra and Mehen. That when you come, this is a brisa that is related to, I think, the opening Mishnah in Avodah Zarah that says that we don't collect loans from idolaters immediately prior to their holidays. And milva alpeh nifrain mehen. But an oral loan you can collect. So unlike the rabbis who say all loans you can't collect, Rabbi Yoshua ben Karka differentiates between loans that are on a document and loans that are not. And why does he allow the collection of loans? Well, let's first say, why do we not allow the collection of loans that are on a contract? Malva b'shtar einifron mehem Rashi 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9 lines up, or now 8 lines up. Lifnei idehen, before their holidays. Mipnei shesimcha hilo, because it will bring joy to the non-Jew to have paid off the loan. V'azil, and he'll go, umodila'akum, and he'll worship his idol, b'yom chagam, on the day of its holiday. So that, therefore, don't do it immediately before the holiday, because otherwise he'll think that he'll be thanking his idol on the holiday, and of course we don't want to even facilitate idol worship by non-Jews. Rabbanan sivri aser liporan v'lifra mehen klal, and the rabbis say even it doesn't make a difference whether it's written or not. It's always prohibited. Okay, so now what about an oral loan? Why do we allow that kind of collection? Because because it's like you're saving the money from their hands. As noted here, the fact is that If you have only an oral loan with somebody, it is relatively easy for them to say that they don't know who you are. And so as a result, the sooner you get your payment back, the better it is. And so as a result, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, you know what? Even if it's before their holidays, we'll allow you to collect it because we don't want them to just deny it. And that way you won't get paid. And so the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karka, according to Rav Huna. So that is statement number one. Okay. And statement number two. Ella halakha and now back to the question that Rav Yosef was wondering. Ella halakha Rabbi Yehuda lamali. But why do I need anybody to tell me that the halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Machlokas va'achar kach stamhi. This is a case where we have a machlokas in our Mishnah, and then a stam Mishnah somewhere else, and we'll tell you where the stam Mishnah is in a moment. Umachlokas va'achar kach stam halacha kistam. And when you have a machlokas followed by a stam Mishnah, that is considered, we follow the halakha of a stam Mishnah. So machlokas b'Bava Kamma, right? The machlokas is here in Bava Kamma because we had in our Mishnah, right? Litzvoa lo adam, litzvoa shachor, utzvoa adam. Rabbi Meir Omer nosin lo demeit samro. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ima shevach yeser al yitzia nosin lo asa yitzia. V'ima yitzia yeser al shevach nosin lo asa shevach. Right? That was the machlokas that we had in our Mishnah. That if the dyer dyes it the wrong color, so Rabbi Meir says the dyer just pays back the value of the wool. It's almost like he stole the item, and the same rule would apply. Just as the item that you steal, you just have to pay back the original value. So too here. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, this person gave him the item in order to improve, and now all he's gonna get back is his original investment. He should get some benefit associated with the mistake that happened. And so as a result, he says that whichever is less is what the owner pays. The owner gets the item, and he either pays the lesser of the expenses or the lesser of the improvement. So ustam b'Bava Metzia, and we have a stam mishnah in Bava Metzia. And what's that stam mitzvah? This stam mishnah, excuse me. And this mishnah is on daf ayin vav amud aleph in Bava Metzia. Ditanan kol hamishaneh. Any person who changes what they are assigned to do, yado al hatachtona, their hand is on the lower, meaning they get paid back a lesser amount. And the implication is exactly as Rabbi Yehuda had here, that if the improvement exceeds the expense, the owner pays just the expense. And if the expense exceeds the improvement, then the owner pays only the improvement. And similarly, anybody who backs out of a deal, yado al tachtona, again, his hand will be on the lower side. So the point is here we have a stam mishnah in Bava Metzia that tells us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So
But why is it that, I'm sorry,
sure.
that Reb Meir would not hold that he would pay kefil, that he only pays the value of we were learning a lot of things in Bava Kamma earlier, the picking. Now, does that only apply to the ox and the shore? So, but I mean,
No. The kefil is because there's no intention to steal. If there was an intention to steal, then you would be right. Or if the person had stolen the wool and dyed it, then you would be right. He would and of course he was coming to claim it, and he was caught in court. But here there was never a denial of whose wool this was. This is a dyer who has been given the wool, a worker, a tradesperson who's been given the wool. So that's why this is a very different situation, and there is no applicability of the concept of kefil. Kefil was for a gazlan who stole something. That's
right.
where we had the double payment. But here, this is just somebody who either made an honest mistake or an intentional mistake, but he's effectively a damager, not so much a thief. Even though obviously those many of the issues related to how much a damager pays can be learned from how much a thief pays, but it's not the same thing, and that's why there's no
But we're
double.
considering it, and I think you mentioned a few moments ago, we're considering it as if he stole it. So therefore he has to pay back the value of the wool. But
Correct, but remember, even a thief who pays back the original value, if he's volunteering, he never pays back the double.
right, right.
Right?
If
It's
he
only
volunteered,
it's
if he's
only if he gets
molded, if he's
caught.
molded,
Exactly. If he's molded that he stole it. So here there's never been any kind of contradiction. It's not as if the person said, "You never gave me anything," and then they proved that in fact he had been given the stuff. Then I think you would be right. Then he would also be paying double. Okay,
uh-huh.
so the Rav Huna. So in second, so now Rav Huna, we have a question for Rav Huna. Why would he not hold the principle that Rav Yosef says that this is an obvious thing? You don't need to tell me that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. We know the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda because, of course, we know all of Shas, and therefore we know that in Bava Metzia there's a Stam Mishnah that's like him. So Itzrach, he says, no, you do need it because Salka Daita Kamina ain't Seder the Mishnah, Ustam Va'akakach Machlokasi. How do I know that there's any order to Mishnayis whatsoever? And maybe this is not a stam and a machlokas v'akakak stam. Maybe the order of the Mishnayos should be viewed as the other way around, where you have a stam Mishnah followed by a machlokas, and then of course we would not say that the halacha is like the stam Mishnah. The Rav Yosef. Well, 1 second. Why doesn't isn't Rav Yosef also worried about this mixing up of order? But that would undermine every situation of saying stam machlokas va'akar stam. So how would you ever have that? Why do we even have this principle? Ustam va'akar machlokasi, right? Every machlokas and akar stam is really could be a stam ba'akar kach machlokas. So how do you ever differentiate? So that can't be the case. Rav Yosef would tell Rav Huna. But Rav Huna, how does Rav Huna reply to that? No, kilo amrina and aim seder mishnah. When do we say that there's no order? Bechada mesecha. Um, um, uh, when do we? I'm sorry. Ki lo amrinan ain seder mishnah. When is it that we don't say that? Sorry, the double negative got me. When is it that we don't say? Meaning, when do we say that there is an order to the mishnayos? B'chada masechta, when there's all one masechta. Aval betray masechtot amrinan. But when it comes to two masechtas, we do say that there's a question about the order, and we don't necessarily have an order from one Maseches to another. So here we have a Bava Kamma machlokas and a Stam Mishnah and Bava Metzia. So as a result, we're going to say that there's no order to the Mishnayos. Rav Yosef, would he say in response? No, Kula Nazikin Chada Masechtahi. When it comes to Nazikin, specifically Bava Kamma, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, we say that it's all one Masechet. And therefore, but it's been divided into three parts. And so as a result, that's why we would say it. The bias ema, or alternatively, Rav Yosef would tell you, no, mishum de katani la gabi hilchasa pasikasa. That the point is that when we have that Mishnah over there, what did that Mishnah say? It was a series of halachot. It said kol mishana yado ala taktona, v'kol hachozer bo yado ala taktona. It's not just one halacha; it's multiple halachas. And as Rashi puts it, the bias ema. Hachtama vaday ikerhu. This there were now 5 lines up in the Rashi, first words on the line. This Stam Mishnah is definitely the main point, meaning this is the one that's the core. This is the one that tells us the halacha, and the halacha is like it. Because when we learned it over there in Bava Metzia, Davai and Bava Medal, Gabi Hilchasa Pesikasa, Daha Lo Sheicha Hasam. This is not some law that is relevant to the discussion over there. Below Tani Elamishum Pisuk Halacha Shapaska Hatana. That this rule that was taught there is taught there because this was the psak halacha that the Tana had. Im kol achozer bo, along with the law of those who go back and renege on a deal. Shano lechlak adam aleihem, so that people would not argue about them. So that's why it's taught there. So there are two bases. Either Rav Yosef would tell you all of Nezikin's one tractate, and therefore you can apply the principle of machlokas va'akar stam here, or alternatively, you don't even have to look at that issue. You can look at the context and see that the laws are that this is a series of halachot that's being taught, and that shows that the halacha is like that. Okay. So now the Gemara teaches a related brisa. So Tana Rabbanan, Hanosein Mos L'shlucho. If you give money to an agent, as we turn to Kofet Amabet, Likach Lochitin in order to buy wheat. V'lakach Mehen Sorin, and the guy bought barley instead. So just as we had a wrong action by the dyer in our Mishnah, now we have the wrong action by your agent, by your business partner, essentially. So Orin the Lakach Mehen Chitin, or you told him to buy barley and he bought wheat. So Tanya Chada, we have one brisa, im pacha so low. If there's any loss, the loss is for the agent. Im hosiro low. And if there's any gain, the gain is for the agent, meaning that effectively the agent ends up owning the whole thing, and because he didn't follow directions, and the original money goes back to the other partner, and it's all good luck or bad luck is all based on the agent. But we have another brisa that says, Im pakaso lo. If there's any kind of loss, the agent suffers a loss. But if there's any benefit, then the benefit is going to be split. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, easy explanation. Lo kasha ha Rabbi Meir ha Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir is the one who says everything goes to the agent because the agent has changed what he was supposed to do, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. It's just like. And the second brisa would be like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that we punish the agent and essentially say that his hand is on the bottom. So Rabbi Meir to Amar Rabbi to Amar Shinoi Kona, because Rabbi Meir is the one who says that if you make a change, you effectively acquire the situation. But Rabbi Yehuda to Amar Shinoi Ona Kona, and this is Rabbi Yehuda who says that if you make a change, you don't actually make an acquisition. So Maskiv lo Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said this doesn't make any sense because Mimai Dilma ad kan lo kam Rabbi Meir elabamidi dechazu leguve. Maybe Rabbi Meir would say that the only time you acquire something is when you make a change, you acquire something is when the original item is for the owner's personal use. But maybe when it's for commerce, who cares that you made a deviation? After all that matters is whether or not you did you were engaging in business. So Ella Amar Rabbi Lazar. So Rabbi Lazar therefore says Hava ha Rabbi Meir. Actually, they're both Rabbi Meir. Below kasha kan la achila kan la schora. When you're doing it for eating, when you're asked to buy it in order for the person to buy it, well, then the agent is going to have acquired the produce for himself because he didn't do what he was supposed to. But when he was doing it for business, so then if it all went well, so then the value gets split, and if it didn't go well, then he's going to effectively get punished. So Magachu Alaba Ma'raba in Eretz Yisrael, they said, one second, this all doesn't work because Rabbi Yochanan Aliba to Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yehuda, how in the world, when the owner when the person who is selling the wheat, how does he know who he's supposed to give the wheat to? Meaning, from his perspective, isn't it all being bought by the agent? So as a result, as Rashi says, Mihodiu, Lamoker Hachitin, second narrow line in Rashi, who tells the seller of the wheat, Shilitzorach Bal Hamos Hain, that this was really for the owner of the money, meaning the investor, Shiyakna Lo, that he was being acquired for. The Katani Hotiru Le'emsa, that we should say that they should split it. Because Bishlam Rabbi Lazar Ali the Rabbi Meir, it makes sense according to Rabbi Lazar, according to Rabbi Meir, to Amar Bekoldahu Nichale, because at least the buyer was okay with it. Lav Mishanahu. He hasn't the agent hasn't made such a change, and therefore Vishlich Lusei, and he remains Debal Habayas, he remains Kabid, and so he remains somebody who's the agent of the original guy, of the money investor. The cunning, and therefore he acquires Bal Mos Maxis Haskar. He'll acquire part of the benefit. Ella Rabbi Yochanan. Da'amar Mishanahu. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that he's made a change, below Abishlikos, and therefore it's no longer doing any kind of agency, Umiu Shinui Lo Kani, and therefore and yet he says that you haven't made an acquisition through the change, Kasha. So then it's difficult to Miman Kabai Lamikne. How did he get any kind of acquisition rights into it? Halo Kananehu Balmos Meolam. The owner of the money never made an acquisition at all. So Maskif lo Rav Shmuel Bar Sasrate. So Rav Shmuel Bar Sasrate says, no, that doesn't work because Ihachi Afilu Chitin Chitin Namilo. Even when the buyer, when the agent does the acquisition of the right item, how does the seller ever know that the wheat is going to the money man, to the investor? So I'm Rabbi Abau. Well, 1 second. Of course, then when it buys the right thing, shiny chitin mechitin to ka'avid. Then he's doing his agency. Dummy, and the person and the agent is like the owner, and so as a result, he's fulfilled his obligation. So Teda, and we know that that's the case. It's not. Whether you consecrate all of your property for the Beis Hamikdash or you make a vow to give all of your value to the Beis Hamikdash, he doesn't take away the clothing that the wife has, and he doesn't take away the clothing of his children, and not even and not even garments that he has given to a dyer in order to dye for his wife and children. Sandalin, and not for a shoemaker, and also shoes that he bought for them. Meaning, if there's garments or clothing that are being prepared for the children and the wife, he is considered to have they will remain his, because presumably we're going to say, because the husband is effectively acting as the agent for the wife and the children. So va'amai, and why is it that these newly dyed clothing or the shoes still go to the wife and the children, even though technically they should be considered property of the husband and therefore go to the Beis Hamikdash because the guy has given all of his property to the Beis Hamikdash? Lema hakinami. So miho dio litzaba shiyaknit sabo leisha. Who's the one who told the dyer to transfer the color to the clothing? El mishum da amrina dishlichuse ka'abit. He was carrying out an agency on behalf of his wife. Ubiyad ishtodami, and so he's like an arm of his wife. So hakanami shlichuse ka'abit. Here too, it's like he's an agent for the business partner, ubiyad balabayas dummy, and so therefore it's like he's the investor. So I'm a Rebbe Abba. No, this is not actually, that Mishnah that you just cited. This Mishnah in Arachin is not actually a good proof, because Kol Hamakadish, Kol Hamakdish Nechasav Ein Daito Al Kasusish Tovanab. Maybe it's just that when you make all of your property go to the Beis Hamikdash, you don't intend to cover your wife's clothing, so it has nothing to do with the husband being the wife's agent. And Matthew loved Rabbi Zera, and Rabbi Zera objected. Well, 1 second, what about your tefillin? We say that when it comes to your tefillin, you have to even give that to the Beis Hamikdash, and certainly you wouldn't have intended to give that utnan. And yet we learned in a Mishnah, hamakdish nekasav ma'alin alo tefillin. You have to give away your tefillin. So what that doesn't that show that you should it's not about your intention, but rather it must be about your having been an agent. So Amar Abaye, no, Daito shall really your intention was to give the tefillin. Daito shall Adam shall al tefillin. He does intend to give his tefillin because Hamakdin is because of Sabar Mitzvah Ka'avdidna. Because he's feeling, I'm doing a mitzvah, and therefore I'm going to include everything that I own. But he's not going to take away his clothing of the wife and his children, because he doesn't want to create the ill will that's going to, the animosity that's going to create. So Maskif Rav Oshia objected, Bahalo Chayve Arachin Shanukan. But 1 second, we also have the law associated with Arachin, namely if you commit to give your own value, Utnan Chayve Arachin Mimashknin Osan, that we actually take a security against those who make an erech vow. And do we assume that the person knew that he was going to have some kind of security taken from him? Of course not. So Elam or Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba says, "Call a makdish nechasav naaseh kamisha hikna lahen kasus ishto ubanav meikar." So anybody who gives his stuff to the Beis Hamikdash, he's of course having in mind as if he's giving his clothing and the clothing that his wife and children own to them beforehand. So as a result, although we now have this interesting debate about whether or not we would say these two brisas, are they both Rabbi Meir, or is one Rabbi Meir and one Rabbi Yehuda? But you cannot necessarily prove that when it comes to an agent is like the original person from this Mishnah in Erechim. And so with that, we're going to close for today. And then the Gemara is next going to address where a situation where one buys a piece of property for himself, but he says that he's doing so for the Reish Galusa, for the head of the diaspora. So if you'd like to learn why one would do that and what the ramifications are, stay tuned for tomorrow's.
A little bit confused. Who's the investor and who's the buyer and who's the agent? Isn't the seller?
The buyer is the agent, just to be clear. The buyer and the agent some may have accidentally been used by me interchangeably. The investor and is the person who's providing the money to the agent, and the agent then goes and buys the produce from the produce seller. Okay, so now having said that, please go ahead and ask your question.
Well, the seller, he's selling, isn't the agent selling produce for the buyer?
No.
The agent is selling something?
No, the agent is going to do business for the buyer. The agent is going to do business for the investor, and the first step of that business is to buy wheat or barley. And the problem is that the guy was told to buy one and he bought the other. And we have a one brisa that says that all the produce effectively becomes owned by the agent / buyer because he bought the wrong thing. And therefore, if it goes up in value, he gets the whole benefit. If it goes down in value, he gets the whole loss. And the other brisa said, no, you have that if the buyer buys the wrong thing, if the agent / buyer buys the wrong thing, so if it goes up in value, so they'll split it because he's still the agent and did business and he was successful. So we're going to treat it as if it was a legitimate business deal. But if in fact the produce goes down in value, so then it would be fully suffered by the buyer / agent because he didn't buy the right thing. So those are the two prices.
And the investor who gave the money to the agent, he doesn't lose anything then, right?
So in that situation, the agent, in both situations, both prices, the principal, the person who's the investor, loses nothing. In one brisa, he loses nothing because it's as if he has no skin in the game whatsoever. And in the second brisa, he only gets the upside.
But he gave the money to the agent, so
obviously, yes, he will get back his original investment. Yeah, the agent will owe the original investor his money back. You're absolutely right. That's exactly right. He gets his money back. It doesn't mean that he gets nothing. He gets his original money back, but nothing extra and nothing less. In the first brisa, and in the second brisa, where it says the agent gets the loss, but the profits are split. The original guy, the investor, gets all of his money back, and then if it happened to have also gone up in value, so then he would also take a share of those profits.
So it's not considered like a case of theft that we were quasi quote unquote theft. The agent still remains the agent of the investor.
Correct.
And he's still mechuyav to return the original investment to his boss because he got the money from the boss to do his work as an agent.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Have a wonderful day. It is a little confusing. We'll look forward. We'll look forward to continuing our learning together. Again, interesting case of what happens if you say you're buying something on behalf of somebody else when you aren't actually doing so. Have a great day, everybody.